The story we were looking at is from CNN. Student loan interest resumes Friday and payments restart in October. Here's what borrowers should know. For the first time in more than 3 years, federal student loan borrowers will be required to pay their monthly student loan bills starting in October. The pandemic-related pause, which went into effect March 2020, provided relief to nearly 44 million borrowers by freezing their accounts. Interest will start accruing again on September 1st, after rates were effectively set to zero. Since March 2020, we know that now interest rates, which are fixed and vary by loan, will return to the same rate they were before the freeze. But borrowers still won't need to take any action until their first monthly payment is due, which means if you don't take action, you will be accruing interest on your debt and then have to pay more money.
And as an aside, the difference between a forbearance and a deferment is that a forbearance means you don't have to pay, but you're still accruing interest, whereas a deferment, you don't pay, but you don't accrue interest. And those are ideal, if you're going to put them off.
For most borrowers, the first payment will be due sometime in October, but not everyone has the exact same date. Borrowers can expect to receive their bill listing their payment around the due date at least 21 days beforehand. So will my payments be the same? They generally will be. How do I find out? Blah, blah, blah. My payments were automatic before. Blah, blah. These questions aren't really as relevant. What happens if I don't pay my student loan bill? Because interest will start accruing on September 1st, not making a payment will result in a borrower owing more on their student loans over time. But for the next year, through September 30, 2024, the government is providing what it's calling an on-ramp period, during which borrowers are shielded from other normal consequences of missing a payment. A loan servicer won't, for example, report the loan as being in default to the national credit rating agencies. Borrowers don't need to apply for this benefit. This is one of the funnier elements of this. It means that as the economy starts crumbling and debt spirals out of control, you won't be able to know about it because they're not going to report the delinquencies. That means when that on-ramp period ends, you're going to see delinquencies from like 3% to like 43% overnight.
I wonder if we get to a point, just like we were just talking about with laws, where people are like, I don't respect that law. People are just like, I don't respect my debt.
I think there are a lot of people who say stuff like that. They're like, why this is like, I'm never going to be able to play this off. I'm not going to deal with it. Like there's nothing I can do. I mean, ultimately, theoretically with consequences, but this is why the argument of like, Joe Biden campaigned on, I am going to forgive student loans. That was him saying, essentially, I'm going to bail you guys out. And that's why people feel attached to him, I think, and why it's potentially the biggest flaw in his campaign, because there are people who are counting on the fact that they will not have to pay these loans because they see it as an impossible financial hurdle.
What were you saying?
I was going to say the biggest problem for me is that there's nothing stopping it from happening again if they were to bail everybody out, right? Because
unless they stopped issuing government-backed student loans, which they won't do. They still haven't done it. Sorry.
Well, even on top of that, they're not doing anything as far as the universities. What's their culpability to it? Like, why does the same school that taught your parents, how come it costs 10 times more? No one addresses that, but they can just charge whatever they want and the government just packs it up. How come the government doesn't have stipulations, right?
Why can't you default on student loans?
Right. Why can't we do? Well, then, yeah.
You used to be able to. I think George Bush Jr. made it illegal to bankrupt your student loans, 2003 or something.
Right, because, and I'm willing to bet, I could be wrong, it's because the federal government stepped up even more with student loans. So they said, if we're going to step up even more and invest in the American public, we can't have them all defaulting because that would default the government. Well, here we are.
Rather than just be like, maybe this isn't a great system. Maybe we should consider not issuing these. Maybe we shouldn't be so obsessed with college being the one path to anywhere in America.
I'm sorry.
I get that banks are for profit, so they want to charge you interest to make money, which is disgusting, but that's the system. But that the government is doing this for profit, that they're going to loan me money and then expect interest back. Like they loaned me 20 grand. I don't want to pay them back more than 20 grand. I've already paid $13,000 in interest.
But it's not so much about a profit. It's about how the modern monetary system works. And with the creation of the money supply, what they want you to do is pay back. Grant, don't get me wrong. Like a lot of these interest rates are greater than the rate of inflation. But a component of it is if the economy is inflating by 3%, we want you to pay back comparable buying power. If we give you 100 apples, we want 100 apples back. Guess what? In a year, apples are going to cost more money. You're gonna need more money to pay back.
I'd be down with that if you paid back with your increase with inflation. If it went up with inflation, that would be understandable. That would be logistical. But this just flat out interest rates, compound interest on 18-year-olds that aren't taught about compound interest. Full predatory, man. And I don't refuse to pay back the interest. I'm not interested in doing it.
Here's a story from entrepreneur.com. This gets worse before it gets better. Kevin O'Leary warns of real chaos set to hit the U.S. economy this fall. I thought this was interesting. I saw this a couple days ago. He said, you're just starting to see the chips fall. The layering is as follow. The regional banks don't know yet what their capital requirements are going to be. So their loan books have closed like a turtle in a shell. This gets worse before it gets better. And what's it doing to small business? Killing them right now. O'Leary argued that not enough money is being pumped into small businesses and blamed the most recent Fed hikes, including a benchmark raise of 0.25% last month, yada, 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 yada. The only thing I really care about this article is it's another high-profile business person sounding the alarm bells in the economy. Mm-hmm. And after learning about what's about to happen with student loans kicking in and a lot of people not being able to pay them back, it is not unreasonable, in my opinion, that could be a large catalyst, or at least a small component of. I don't know if it's be the big component or the small component of some kind of economic crisis, especially if it hits the co-signers on the student loan debt. And then, of course, you have, I've mentioned several times, Michael Burry betting against the U.S. stock market. It seems like the people who have a lot of money are concerned the market's going to take a hit. I have no idea what that means. I got people asking me every day, like, should I buy property right now? I'm like, I had no idea. Because they're like, but if the market's going to crash, I'm like, maybe, probably. I have no idea.
What upsets me the most, and it's so infuriating, is we get these jobs numbers out every month, and the White House or mainstream media, take your pick, they put this positive little spin on it and wrap it up in a little bow, rather than just telling the Americans, hey, here's the problem, and here's what you guys can do as citizens of this country to help everybody and work towards resolving this problem, because it is so complex and there's no easy solution out of this.
The economy?
Yeah. I mean, this all ties into the state of the economy right now.
It's not monetary, that's for sure. We're not going to fix the economy by another kind of money. It's going to be through materials. I talked with Stu Peters about this. I believe it's live on his channel on Rumble, but I'll be posting a link on that on Twitter later. The interview I did with Stu Peters. It's technology. If we can make energy cheaper, make fuel cheaper, then the economy has become better. And so if a tenth of the economy is fuel and you make that a tenth cheaper, you've basically made 1% of your economy. You've made your economy a 1% better. So it's like, that's why I'm obsessed with hydrogen fuel right now. Like, I feel like we can make cheap fuel, make cheap heat, electricity, building materials, transportation, the basics.
The trouble is when you see these videos at a Times Square where someone goes up to another person and says, name a country that starts with the letter U, and they can't do it. Or they say, like, who's the current president of the United States, and they don't know it. And they'll say, like, when did America get its independence? And they'll be like, 1871. Like, they've no idea. And you have a lot of these people, they vote. And when you see these videos, there are powerful individuals who then are deeply offended that these people are consuming resources and polluting. And so they turn around and say stuff like, we need to get a control on overpopulation because there's too many of these people weighing us down. You then get phrases like useless eaters. You get weird international policies such as you will own nothing and you will be happy. And ultimately that means, Ian, you will not get your cold fusion and your spaceships, because in the event that there's an energy revolution on par with like this level of fusion energy, which is insane, that would mean a massive and explosive population boom.
That's for sure.
And there's a lot of powerful people who don't want that to happen.
You think with how expensive college is, we'd be seeing some more of these technological advancements. We wouldn't be seeing train derailments in East Palestine with how much Americans are paying for college. But we're not.
But the other thing is, like, college is a business, right? Like, yeah. I don't even know that all degrees are equal. I think there are programs that are probably great, but generally people are paying to have their certificate. They are not actually always advancing to the level that we'd like them to see, or that would be implied by the fact that you went to college. A lot of people are in debt, basically having graduated by the skin of their teeth and having learned nothing. I mean, there are colleges that closed during COVID because the enrollment is so low and because ultimately the business of college is failing.
Small Rabbit Monkey said, yes, you will, Ian. Don't listen to Tim. So I'm going to see that cold fusion. Thanks, Small Rabbit
No,
Monkey.
I think we will, but I think there's powerful individuals who are trying to reduce population.
And they have a reasonable fear, because if every human had access to unlimited energy, Timothy McVeigh, what else would he have blown up? Like a psychoterrorist that had a horrible childhood, just beat, that hates humanity, has access to unlimited power. Like, that's severely dangerous. So I understand why. But there's scales. I don't want to give everyone cold fusion packs just yet, but hydrogen fuel, it's lightweight and could be cheaper than gasoline.
I'm thinking about what is about to hit the economy, and perhaps the only solution is going to be student loan debt forgiveness in some capacity. It was easy to say when we were talking about 24 and 25-year-olds up to maybe like early 30s that we don't want to forgive student loans. These older people have all paid them back. It's like, look, these people hate why it's not fair. There's a lot of questions about fairness, about making the working class pay the bills of the highest income earners. But I think there is a harsh reality to whatever your opinion is. You're presented with two parent factions or parent paths to take. One, we do not bail out the people who have student loan debt. And then these people who are in their mid to late 30s and 40s, don't have families, don't have kids, don't buy property, become angry and purposeless and violent. Or we do bail them out, and the people who are supposed to be the crux of the economy resume working, have the load taken off their backs, and it stabilizes things a little bit. It's a question about the 2008 crisis when they bailed out the banks. Do you let the economy just course correct, shock everybody? There's going to be large amounts of death because of this, because of the economic crisis? Or do you bail out, alleviate some of the crisis, extend it for a little longer, but reduce the amount of death? It's serious questions. I think that the reasonable approach that the government will likely want to take is going to be a bailout, whether Joe Biden wants to or not. And in fact, you may see this in 2024, Joe Biden coming out and saying, one of the biggest drags on our economy right now is student loan debt, and you all know it. Each and every one of you that has settled the debt that you can't pay back as you're living paycheck to paycheck, we will get it done. We will pass the bill, blah, blah, blah. You got to vote for Democrat, down ticket. What's Trump going to say?
Well, you look at what they're doing. So if I owe Joe Biden 10 grand in debt, he's like, you can't pay that back. So what I'm going to do is print money and then take it from you and pay me back sooner. Right. And I'm like, dude, you can't force me to pay you back, Joe Biden. And no, let me pay you back at my pace, which is a zero because I have no interest in paying it back.
But I think the libertarian response is going to be let the system crumble. Just let it fall apart, and then we'll just restart from where we are.
I'm all about with putting the default on the loaners. Whoever loaned the money, you're not getting it back. I'm not all about printing up money to pay back those loaners.
But the problem is the loaner is the government.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to take the default. I mean, what's the point anyway? It's like $1 trillion. What's the difference?
I mean, I would love to have one presidential candidate say, when I'm in office, I'm going to stop issuing student loans, right? Because the system is broken. We can see it. We haven't dealt with the fallout yet. But no one is saying that. Like, why can't we just stop a terrible program from existing?
I gotta read this super chat from Sumner Robinson. Mm-hmm. Citibank has a total of, is that 14 trillion? No, 14 billion?
15, basically.
About 15 billion. I was like, the trillion doesn't make sense. Oh, no. Okay, I see right here. 15 billion shorting the NASDAQ and 7 billion shorting the S&P. Bank of America has 23, is that billion, shorting the NASDAQ and 18 billion shorting the S&P. Reminds me of The Big Short, when the guys who bet against the housing market were wondering why their credit default swaps were stable as delinquencies were skyrocketing and the mortgages were becoming worthless. It's because the banks were lying about what was going on so they could offload their exposure to unsuspecting smaller banks and lenders or individuals. So they would go and say, hey, this is worth a lot of money, you should buy it. Then they would. Then as soon as they offloaded all their debt, they went, market's exploding, have a nice day. And nobody goes to jail for it.
And at the end of The Big Short, remember they said, they had a little joke. How you're like, oh, we totally held people accountable. Just kidding. No, we didn't. So my question to you guys is, regarding the current situation, the current economy and student loans, should anyone be arrested? And if so, who? Should people be held accountable? What should happen? I know you guys kind of started talking about it with the defaulters. Or
I don't know about arrest, but what I will say is, if you actually want to solve a problem, you first identify what's causing the problem. And I don't see that part. I see people are going straight to the problem and trying to band-aid it, but ultimately they're not stopping, the bleeding from the wound. The biggest issue that I see is that the federal government is trying to play manufacturing middle class. Right. So that's why they're throwing all this money. Anybody can get a student loan. That's when you start seeing for-profit colleges that don't care about anything. Whereas our parents' days, they got accepted into school. That was the only way you got a college education, right? So they had some sort of merit base. And then on top of that, they had to find some sort of way to get a loan. But back then it was reasonable. Now it's become an entire economy on its own based off of cheap money from the government, because it's no regard. They'll just give it to anybody. That's part of the problem. Same thing with the 2008 crash. Ultimately, it stemmed from the federal government trying to manufacture the middle class by saying the American dream is to own a home, so we're going to make it easier for everybody. And what did they do? They messed up the market, and they incentivized chaos. And that's what we're seeing with the student loan market. And they're not going to punish the people who are actually abusing it. Right, the colleges, no one's talking about the colleges. Everything's about what's Joe Biden going to do. No one's ever talked about the colleges. No one ever talks about the endowment, right? No one ever.
Chamberlain does.
What is the
seize the endowments?
What's the endowment? Yeah, I hear that. Seize the endowments. What is the endowment exactly?
It's basically how much money they just got sitting in reserves, right? So,
given just
money that's been left to them or given to them.
Yeah.
Okay, tax-free stuff. People are donating.
People are
it?
donating, getting a tax credit, and then that generates money off of it.
Does the government give them endowment money as well?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so. But even from the fact that, let's say you have a college that has, $500 million. I don't know. I'm just making up a number, but they're still charging your kid $20,000 a semester, right? Does that seem like it makes a whole lot of sense? Why is it so expensive? I'm not saying it should be free, but why is it so expensive? And on top of that, I was talking to Shane Cashman. He was an adjunct professor. They don't pay anything for these people, and they hire a whole bunch of adjunct professors. So. I mean, it's
a scam.
It's one big scam. And now they're saying, let's bail out everybody, keep the system in place. And guess what? In 10 to 15 years, we'll be back at the same point.
Yeah, it seems like the college system is decrepit at this point, and that you can educate yourself online and learn faster, more readily, and from home.
Are the salaries of the presidents of colleges public, generally speaking? I don't know off the top of my head. I'd be so curious to see how much money the upper management is making at these schools, because I had no idea about the adjunct professor thing.
$2 million
crazy.
Yeah.
The president of Yale makes $1.9 million a year.
And remember, there's like the adjunct professors, but then they hire crazy administrative blow, right? There was a administrator and a sub-administrator and someone who helps with the paperwork and whatever else, all the way down. So if the point of the institution is to have, professors that are researching and studying things, that they're good educators, why are they not the priority? Why do we have 85 administrators for every one professor? That's not the actual statistic. I'm making that up.
But they're never incentivized to cut the fat.
Yeah.
Right. They operate very similar to how the government operates. They create a job and that job never goes away. Right. So if the government said, we will only give money, but only up to a certain amount, and they started doing that wide scale, they'd have no choice but to cut the costs. Otherwise, they have no customer, right? So then what do? They start cutting the fat. We can't have 5 administrators for this task. We have to reduce it because we can't afford this if we're going to keep everybody making about the same amount. So we have to start cutting the fat. No one ever does that when it comes to college debt. They always say, what's the federal government going to do for us? They're the ones who screwed this all up in the first place.
And that's by giving unlimited loans?
Yeah. I mean, quite literally.
But you can't default on it.
You can't default on it, but anybody can get it.
Were they like trying to catch up with the colleges raising costs so they would give more loan? They'd be like, oh, we'll cover it. We'll cover it.
I've always heard the inverse, that colleges raise costs because basically they were guaranteed that you would be able to pay tuition. Instead of being like, well, what can the average family or the average individual reasonably pay to attend our school? They were like, well, you just take out a loan, right? Like even now, I don't know if your son will end up, if he's not applied to college yet, right?
No.
Okay, so some colleges will send you like the acceptance letter. I remember this happening to me, and they'll be like, congratulations, you got a scholarship. That's so exciting. Except half of your scholarship is a loan. So they're presenting it to you like, wow, we really want you to come here. But actually what they want is for you to take out a loan to go there, which is what everyone wants you to do anyways. That's also what the federal government wants you to do. One time we talked about on the show, like, I don't advocate that you give to your university, but if you were to, why can't you give directly to a student who is trying to pay off their student loans? Why can't you cover a portion of tuition instead of it going into a pool where then the 800 administrators that they have decide who gets it later? Why can't you have a more direct contact with the student? Because again, ultimately a lot of the money goes into the endowment, which never really reaches the people who need it, like the program heads, like the adjunct professors, like the students.
Well, back to what Tim said. It's a scam.
Uh-huh.
It's not really about the students, right? They give them a superficial product to make them feel like they're learning, right? We go and take these useless classes to make us feel like we're being educated, right? But they leave, and I've talked to so many college graduates where I'm like, I don't know what I learned, right? So you spent 4 years in college, you came out learning what? But you owe all this money. You got scammed, son. Like, I don't know any other way to put it.
What if we had like a Patreon thing for online college? I know Jordan Peterson's working on setting up an online college, and there's like Phoenix University, which was kind of a predecessor. I don't know how that works exactly, but like if you could watch the individual students learning and you're like, I love that guy. I love how fast he's learning. I want to give him $10 a month. Just like that for a cup of coffee a day, you can.
But like, not the students, the professors.
Oh,
So-
yeah. And you can fund the professors too. That'd be awesome.
But that's how you do it. So what you do is you create an online university that gets accredited, that issues degrees. And then you say, here are all the professors and all the subjects we have available. And when you enroll in one of these classes, you are paying monthly to that professor. The professor, like 5% goes to the university, or 10, like whatever, like probably 10% makes sense because there's like transactional fees and then server fees. But it's basically a Patreon for education.
Yeah.
And then when you complete the course, you'll get a degree from the university.
But for me, who's not even at the school, I just get to watch them learn online, the kids, and they don't have money, some of them. So I want to fund them to go to college. Like, I'm like in my 40s. I'm done with that shit. I just got money lying around. I want to fund. I'm just saying, I personally am not in that state yet, but there's always something to do with your money. But I would like to help fund kids without making them take loans out.
well, those are called scholarships.
Yeah, so it'd be like a proactive scholarship where, like you're saying, you can give money like an endowment directly to the student.
Yeah, I wish there was
A
more
scholarship.
Yeah, that isn't administrated by the university that's going to serve.
Right, where
Yeah,
I get to
they're
pick,
private scholarships. There's tons of them.
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you get to pick who gets it.
Yeah, there's like there's nonprofits
Grants.
and foundations and grants, and there are foundations that will be like, we give a grant to Asian Americans who
Yeah.
are low income and want to go to college, and then they contact the institution, they fill out paperwork, and they say, write us an essay on why we should give you the money, and if you get approved, we pay for your college.
Yeah, but I
Build
guess
this-
I would like to cut out the middleman where it's like if I had money, I could give it directly to a student at a school that
Tax-free.
you know what I mean? Instead of it going to an administrator at a nonprofit or at a school who then decides who gets it later.
Build the technology, call it the scholarship.
It'd be interesting. I mean, one of the challenges is that education is great, and I think people feel starved for that in a way, and I wish we had more decentralized way. I mean, YouTube is the great example, right? Everyone always says you can look up anything on YouTube. You could learn so much, and that's amazing. I wish that like it would be cool if cities had like more. I mean, public libraries do this and stuff. It's just we default to thinking the university is what's providing the lecturers or the things that you can go to just to learn, and I think that's where we kind of get this like shopping mall effect with universities. We think that's sort of where you go, like after you finish high school, you go there and you get all the skills you need, and then you leave, and it's all kind of centrally located. But really, you know, if you're actively interested in a subject, you have to be more proactive. The university isn't going to really educate you on a lot of things, especially, we've talked about this before, when you come out of high school not knowing how to pay your taxes and things like that. Like, there are skills that you just continue to put off, and then finally you're like 22, 23 getting out of college, and maybe you learn something, but also you don't have any practical skills.
Right. And I think part of the problem, I think, is Americans have caved into thinking that education is institutionalized. Like, that's the only way that you can learn. So this means the only way you can learn is by going to a public school. The only way that you can have a real education if you go to a college or a university. That's the only way. Outside of that, you're part of the what? Non-educated class, right? Meanwhile, these people who spend God knows how much money, spend how many years within school, come out knowing nothing and making less. And like everything is the inverse, and it doesn't make any sense. I think we are starting to get back, and I'm trying to do this as a parent, to tell my son that intellect is not necessarily what the teacher puts on your grade. Intellect is far more than that. Intellect is about learning on your own, being curious, going out in the world, experiencing things, having a job, dealing with people, right? And how you react to the world around you in that way. Like, for example, I'm a writer today. I didn't go to school for writing. I figured that out. I figured out how to do all these things by myself. No one had to teach me. I just ask questions. I analyze things. All that takes intellect. All that takes curiosity. But someone would say, I'm not a real writer because I didn't go to a school to get this degree. I don't need all that. I don't have a college degree at all. And some people are surprised by that because they think that I'm very intellectual in some regard.
Credentialism.
It's credentialism.
They think that if you don't have a high school diploma, you must be stupid.
Right. Exactly.
And then they wonder why they're broke and in debt. And there's the pro athletes, tons of pro athletes, especially in skateboarding. Easy example, tons of them quit high school to go pro at skateboarding, and now they're millionaires.
Right.
Not all of them, but the college graduate PhD billionaires typically have less than college dropout billionaires. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.